My name is Alex Roy, and I'm the founder of SalesboxAI. And today we're going to be talking about demand unit-centric ABM. But before I start, I just wanted to quickly find out, could you please raise those who are from an agency or a consultant in the room? Okay. And those who are from a direct brand, a marketer from a direct brand? Cool, so we have a good mix. So this will help me tailor the session for today. So I'm going to, over the next 30 minutes, walk you through, introduce you to ABM, then go into demand unit-centric ABM. We're also going to take one of the brands. We're going to take Digimarcon and see how we can apply this there. So I want you to put your marketing hats, and let's see if we can do this with Digimarcon for next year, right? So how many of you have heard this statement before? The fact of the matter is we live in a demand unit-driven economy today. So if you really look at it, the budget, the decisions, all of this is controlled by the demand unit within an organization. So let's take the Digimarcon example. If they needed a sponsor, or if they needed a delegate to come in to attend this event, it's not a single department who's taking that decision today. There's actually a group of members, a diverse set of group of members, who discuss and then decide on that decision. The business need, and the group who decides for each business need is different. So for example, let's say you take an account like Dell, and Dell requires HR software, Dell requires marketing software. The group of people who decide should Dell have a marketing software is slightly different from the group of people who are going to decide what is the HR software that's going to be Dell, that's going to be used at Dell. For example, you would have the director of HR or the VP of HR have a greater say in that decision compared to a marketing software. So as marketers and as an organization, we would want to focus all our energy on the demand unit, because that's going to translate into sales. That's what's going to translate into opportunities for us. So companies who realize this, what they're doing is they're shifting their focus from being more account-centric to more demand unit-centric. So if you really look at it, it's like you are zooming in. So from 20,000 feet, you just see an account, right, as a marketer when you look down. But then if you zoom down further, you actually see people, right? You actually see the buying group members. And that's whose trust you need to earn as a marketer to make the needle move, right? So companies today is shifting their focus from demand unit-centric, from account-centric to demand unit-centric. Anyone here who is not familiar with ABM itself, let me just recap for them. ABM stands for account-based marketing. It's when an organization as a whole, both sales and marketing, is totally aligned and spending all their resources on very specific target accounts. So they have done the research. They understand that, hey, these are the accounts, these are the companies that we would like to do business with, and how do we align with sales, and as marketing, utilize the limited resources we have, to earn the trust of the people within these accounts. I mentioned about buying group members. It's important to realize how large is the buying group member, right? How large a group are we talking about here, right? Now, a recent research report from Harvard Business Review, they mention it's about 6.8, which means there's about 7 different people whose trust you need to earn as a marketer or a company to sway a decision in your favor. Now, if you look at the buying group members itself, it's not their full-time job, by the way, to buy software or to buy a service, right? What do they spend their time on? It's interesting to see, if you look at the orange section, there's just 17% of time when they're meeting a supplier. And that's your sales team, right? So sales team has the buying group. As marketer, you have the opportunity to complement what sales is doing and then help them in this buying process all across. So you'll see there's a big segment there where they're researching independently online. So this is where, as a marketer, it allows you to focus more on that, aid them in that buying process. You might be familiar with the term sales enablement. There's another term called as buyer enablement. So as a marketing team, you need to be more buyer-focused. You need to be able to, if you could help with the remaining 83%, you would look really good in front of sales. So Being demand unit centric makes you a hero in front of sales, I would say. Okay, so the definition of a demand unit. I touched upon this earlier, but it's a group of people who have come together for a very specific, to solve a specific business need. So for example, a company requires an HR software. So they're going to pool in about 6 to 7 people. Someone's going to be from senior management, there's going to be someone from IT, there's going to be someone from HR, right? And they come together and they start doing research, they start shortlisting the vendors. So as a marketer, it's very important to be aware of what a demand unit looks like. Which brings us to the funnel. Now, this is a slightly different funnel. This is not a lead funnel. This is what we call as a demand unit funnel. And Serious Decisions came up with this demand unit funnel about 2 years back. So I might need for you to visualize this. Let's see if this was a 3D funnel. Let's see what a demand unit would look like. Can I have one of the boxes, if possible? Yep. Perfect. Okay, so that's a funnel. So this is one demand unit. So if this is one demand unit, and let's say we write the name of the company here. So let's say this is Digimarcon, and Salesbox is the account. Now, what would be these tissue papers then? Yeah. So that would be the buying group members, right? So there's about 6 to 7 buying group members within this, right? And probably you would have a stage in which this demand unit is. So it could be in target demand, it could be in active demand, it could be in engaged demand, right? So the stage could be written on this side. You could write on this side, perhaps. It's important to know that there could be multiple funnels. So if you take the example of Digimarcon, they would have, I would say, 3 different funnels. So funnel 1 is where they need sponsors, and they need sponsors, 2 types of sponsors. It could be an agency sponsor, or it could be a software vendor, from sales automation or marketing. It's a marketing software vendor who could be there. What would be the third source of revenue for Digimarcon? What would be the third funnel? So maybe, I took delegates. So let's say, there is people who want to attend the training classes. They purchase tickets for the 2-day courses, right? So that's a separate funnel, right? So it's important to realize it's just not one funnel. For each of the product or service that you have, there is a distinct funnel. And we'll look to see how do you move, so this is not a lead funnel, how do you move things down this funnel, right? So, okay. It starts with target demand. So target demand is when you have identified, you have a named account list, and you have defined personas, so you know whom to talk to. So if you're talking to, if Digimarcon was talking to an agency to sponsor this event, who are the titles they need to be speaking to, right? So once you've identified that, that would allow you to discover buying group members within those agencies that they need to be talking to, okay? So let's say Digimarcon has a list of 500 agencies. They were able to figure out at least one member from 400 of those agencies, right? So how many demand units would be in that funnel? So there's a list of 500, but they were able to get at least one person for 400 of them. So is it those who think it's 500, please raise your hands. Those who think it's 400, you can raise your hands. Those who think it's 50, you could raise your hands. Right, so I saw someone say 400. Yeah. So once you have discovered at least one member, that's when you have a person added into target demand stage, right? The demand unit is in it. The next stage is called active demand. So active demand is when you have that demand unit, members of that demand unit actively researching for content. So how do you make that happen? How do you get to active demand? You've identified them. One is, you could use first-party intent information. This is by having email conversations with members of that demand unit, and you're really trying to get them to click and get to content, get them to read it, so you are gleaning intent, right? Third-party intent is when you have a provider you're working with who is telling you, hey, here's a feed of accounts that's actively researching on this topic, right? Both are valuable. You could do a combination of both. The objective is, you get demand units into active demand stage, which brings us to engaged demand, which is the third stage in the funnel. And engaged demand is when you have members of this demand unit actually responding to you, replying to you. So as a marketer, you need to try and get them to, you need to have email conversations primarily, and you are not trying to get them to click on things, but you are probing questions, right? You're having questions which get them to reply. So often as marketers, we tend to do more of form-based things. It has a place to get active demand, but to get engaged demand, you need conversations to go back and forth. Which brings us to prioritized demand, which is based on scoring rules. So how many of you do here lead scoring? Are aware of lead scoring? So you score leads based on behavior, right? Now, in a demand unit-centric campaign, you score based on leads, you score based on personas, and you also aggregate that at a demand unit level. So it means, what this means is, today, let's say your lead threshold score is 75. That means someone who scores 75 out of 100 is really hot, right? But in today's world, that's really tough to get to happen. If you just look for that, you're missing out on a lot of fainter signals, which is out there today, right? So imagine you had 25 score, but 3 people from the same account of the buying group. And when you look at it at demand unit level, you see a bigger picture. But at an individual level, they haven't crossed that threshold. So suddenly, as I mentioned earlier, you would have missed on the signal, but when you look at it collectively, there's a completely different story, right? And when you collate this, when you aggregate the score back all the way up to the demand unit level, it kind of gives you prioritized demand. And that's the stage when you have, for those of you who have inside sales, that's the time, inside sales, perhaps it's the right time to make a call, qualify the opportunity, and everything from this funnel at the bottom of it. And the next stage is pipeline and closure. So you could look up the serious demand waterfall model. So everything from there on is an opportunity in the CRM, right? So this doesn't replace the lead funnel. It gives you a completely different perspective. It's really great to look at it like, now that's a 2D image. It's like looking at 3D, right? So I would say the lead funnel with leads in it gives you one perspective, but the demand unit gives you a completely different perspective. Which brings us to, let's see how we could do this with Digimarcon as a brand. So there are 5 steps, 5 essentials that you should keep in mind. The first is, we just covered it, was about how do you group the accounts, right? So it's not just good enough to have one big list. So we need to decide how do you group the accounts. Now, for Digimarcon, we identified 3 different groups. What were the 3 different groups? There was software vendors, there was agencies, there were people who were working in companies who would want the training, right? There could be others as well, but this is a good start. There's also cases where, in your specific case, you want to have an account group that is based on a competitor's list. Those who are using a competitor's software. You can be very creative with account groups. You could go based on install base. You could go based on a certain behavior, which gives you some context for conversations. So the more granular you can get, the more meaningful the conversations are, and it'll get you faster to engage demand because you have a context against which you're speaking. Okay, so super targeted, context-driven, which brings us to the next bit, which is identifying the personas that is relevant to Digimarcon. So anyone from marketing here in Digimarcon? Okay, so what are the personas that, so let me just go here to the next slide. It's a team-based thing. So it's important to remember that there is a selling team and there is a buying team. Traditionally, what you do is, in some companies, at least back in the earlier days, you would have an info at or something like that is communicating to everyone in a company, right? But then, it became more, you have now a persona. Now, when in a team-based thing, what happens is, and when it's account-based, you would want your sales member, you would want members from marketing, members from product management. In fact, even the founder in our company, even I am part of that team. And what we do as a team is we orchestrate communications with the other group of 8 people. So it could be 3 to 4 people on this side talking to 8 people on the other side, right? And the one good thing with it is, it's very refreshing. Each person is bringing a different perspective. It becomes a lot more conversational. There are cases where we have, maybe the third message is, the first 2 messages, anyone from sales here? Okay. So, often people don't respond to that sales message. They look at your title and go, okay, he's from sales, he's trying to sell me. You don't get that response. But then perhaps if you were to bring your founder in to that conversation, and he were to CC you and say, hey, by the way, this is what we're doing with another account, suddenly that person tends to respond, right? So you can be very creative in how you orchestrate these conversations. It can be multi-person to multiple people on the other end. So coming back to DigiMarcon, who would be the 3 people you would say would be speaking, right? So there's perhaps someone from marketing, a marketing manager, there's someone from sales who's having the conversation, and they're going to be talking to CXOs, they're going to be talking to founders, they're going to be talking to influencers as well. And once you have identified your personas, then it's time to look at what is the messaging, what is the conversation you want to have with them. So you need to keep in your mind, yes, this is the group of companies, this is a specific persona. So I'm talking to a CXO of a software company, right? So what is the message that I want to convey, right? And it could be very different to an influencer. If I were talking to an influencer within that software company, it could be a very different message. So you would look at your messages should match the account group. It needs to match the persona of the buyer and seller. So when I say persona of the buyer and seller, the tone, the tenor of the conversation that the CEO is having is going to be very different from what a lower title person would have. So as a marketer, you have to be mindful of this and then orchestrate the engagement. So I'm not sure if you're able to see the spreadsheet, but you would see here each of the personas. You could have slightly different conversations. The primary channel being email, but you could also have LinkedIn, Facebook as additional channels to give you, additional support. It's not the same message to everyone. That's one key point, and it's not coming from the same person, right? So if you could drop your business card, we can send you a workbook that would help you to plan for yourself as well. Usually what you do is you start with a specific account group, an account list, and then build that list, and then do it for a specific product or service, and then roll out further down. Anyone here doing today ABM campaigns, account-based marketing campaigns? For your customers or for yourself? Cool. So so this is something you could do, wherein you carve out a certain accounts, an account group, and then do it for them. Which brings us to the last essential bit, which is to, as I mentioned earlier, to score and prioritize it, so that you're able to know which demand unit is ready. So you score it based on the behavioral activity. You have demographic information, behavioral information, just like how you do the lead scoring. But then you also need to aggregate this at a persona level and then further at a demand unit level. So that would tell you which of these demand units are prioritized and then ready for inside sales to take on. So happy to answer any questions you have.